Hi, today we are going to be talking about AMH and your fertility. What does it mean if you have normal or low or high AMH, and how can you think about this for your fertility? I'm Dr. Natalie Masson, and here at Fertility from the Soul, I am empowering you with knowledge and inspiration to help you on your fertility journey. I'm a psychologist specializing in the mind-body connection. I'm not a medical doctor, but I am trained in doing and reading research. So I'm going to be sharing with you how I look at interpreting AMH through a research lens while looking at the current research studies that are out. So this is a live broadcast. I'm excited to see who is here. So please chime in if you are here. Let me know in the chat, where are you logging in from? It looks like we have quite a few people here, and I'd like to see something in the chat so I can confirm that everybody can hear me and we are working and I can see the chat. Okay, here we go. Alyssa from Los Angeles. We have somebody from Chicago. Everybody chime in. I want to see where you are. I'm going to do my best to watch the chat as I'm going, although it's sometimes a little bit hard to multitask. And I'm going to dive right in here to the material because I have a lot that I want to share with you. But I want to honor everyone's time too. So I'm going to try to keep it as condensed as possible. And if you have questions, just throw them into the chat. I have my lovely assistant, Anna, who I believe is also on the live here, and she's going to alert me by message if there's something that I'm not seeing that I need to get to. Okay, so let's talk about what is AMH and why is it something that we need to be very careful in how we think about it. So there are a number of tests that are routinely done to try to give us an idea of what might be going on with our fertility. Some of this is done for people who are seeking fertility treatments to see how they might respond. Some people are getting these tests done at an earlier age to maybe give them an idea of how much time they might have to try to get pregnant. Maybe they aren't even in a relationship yet, but they want to know, should I freeze my eggs? Should I be concerned about hurrying up and getting onto this family thing? So there are a lot of different reasons why people might want to know about it. And it is not something that is even agreed upon within the medical community about how we should interpret this number. And what I observe a lot in the fertility forums that I follow is there are a lot of women getting news about their AMH test and being told certain things and drawing certain conclusions that are not really consistent with what the research literature tells us. So in this session today, I really want to break it down so that you understand what we know about it and what we don't. And I want you to hear, it's very interesting, how the medical researchers are talking with each other about it. And that'll help you see that it's not quite so cut and dry as it's often referred to as a sign of how much fertile potential you have. So I see a lot of stress in women who get a low AMH number thinking, oh my gosh, my chances are done. And some of them have been told that by their doctors, but I want you to get a sense of what is currently being talked about in the research literature on this topic. I'm also going to tell you about, I'm going to share with you my own story and my actual numbers, my AMH lab tests in the year leading up to my final pregnancy, which was when I was 46 years old. So my case is only a case of one, but I'm going to talk about my case and why it makes me so passionate about this topic. And then I'm going to go through the research. And then I'm going to talk about action steps. Where does this leave you now? And I'm going to share with you about a program that is kicking off next week. It's the 7-day Ttc Chill Out Challenge. I'm going to guess there are some of you here who have even been through that already and maybe going through it again. And I want you to know about that because that program opens up every 2 months. And that leads into my other membership program for ongoing fertility support. So if you're interested in a mind-body approach with a lot of focus on healthy living and positive mindset, that's a program that I would encourage you to find out about, because the enrollment is open only through Friday. Then we close over the weekend while I get everything in order, and then we start on Monday. So that's a little bit time sensitive. I'll share about that at the end. Oh, hi, Teresa is getting her AMH test on Friday. Okay, so this is very timely. You'll have an idea, hi Anna, how you might want to think about that number when you get it. Okay, hi Anna and Anna. Anna, my assistant, is here, and Anna Caro is also here. Elizabeth, hello. Nicole, oh, I see so many familiar names here. Hi, Rochelle. Good to see everybody here. And feel free to chat with each other as I'm talking as well. Okay. So I sent out an email to my email list this morning with a little bit of a teaser. It was that time my acupuncturist yelled at me about my AMH or something like that was the subject title. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the background story there just to kind of get us warmed up to a context. So it was 2013. I was 44 years old when we started trying to have our second child. I had my first at 42. And so I was 40, I'm losing track of the numbers. I was 43 or 44. I was 44 when we started trying. And I had been trying for about 6 or 8 months. And I had one acupuncturist who wasn't really into the testing stuff. And I was also kind of hopping around. And I saw another acupuncturist who said, oh, yeah, we can do these lab tests. It'll give us some useful information. So I went in and I got my cycle day 3 hormone lab tests and my AMH, which can be done at any time of the cycle. I had no idea what any of these things meant at that time. And when I got the results back, I kind of looked up to see what they meant. And my AMH was on the low side, you could say. I'm going to show you what my AMH was. This is my low-tech version. This is showing up backwards on my screen. Can somebody tell me, do you see this backwards or are you seeing this forward? Can somebody just tell me so I know if I'm holding up mirror images for you? Can you read this? My AMH was 0.19. Now, anything below 1 is considered kind of low. So 0.19 would be like, okay, it's looking forward reading. That's good. Anything below 1 is considered low. So 0.19 is very low. My FSH, now looking back, would have been even more concerning. Ignorance was bliss. I didn't really get how high 33 is, but if any of you are veterans in this system, below 10 is kind of where you want to be. Above 10 is considered potentially problematic. 33 would be considered very high. Fortunately, I didn't really know that. I just thought AMH, that's kind of low. And I went to my other acupuncturist shortly after that. Oh, no, I don't think I did that first. The next thing I did was I said, that can't be right. I don't think my AMH is that low. Like, what do I know? So the first test was covered by my insurance. The second one, I just paid out of pocket because I just wanted to know. I wanted to see again. So I paid $100 to get AMH tested again the next month, very next month. So keep in mind, a lot of people say these numbers, FSH and AMH, are supposed to be fairly stable, or FSH jumps around a little. So are you ready? This is my second round of tests. A month later, I'm 44 years old. I've been trying to get pregnant for about 6 or 8 months and haven't had a positive pregnancy test yet. And I wanted to, I'll show both of these in case anybody's just popping in out, because this was my first test in April of 2014. And then this is my next test a month later. So I was doing this, remember I was doing this to prove to somebody, myself, I guess, that my AMH really wasn't that low. And it came back lower, 0.07. And my FSH came back lower. So it's 33 1 month, the next month is 9. Interesting. Who knows what that's about? And it's interesting, actually, scanning back even farther, I had my annual exam from my OB sometime before when I first started trying for a second. So, and I asked him about lab tests. I said, is there something I should do testing? I've heard AMH and stuff. He said, yeah, it's really just a waste of your time because of your age, your AMH is going to be low. So why waste your time and energy getting a test that's going to say you're on the old side and your AMH is low? So I think I kind of had that resistance, like, oh, I'm going to prove him wrong. So yeah, I went back and got my AMH tested again, and it came back even lower. Okay, So then I went to my acupuncturist, who doesn't seem to focus that much on testing. And I told her about this as I was lying in the dim light on the acupuncture table, a very soothing setting. And her response was, I said, I don't know, my AMH is pretty low. I'm not sure if I should be concerned about it. She goes, AMH means nothing. she was very passionate about this. It wasn't, I don't think you should be concerned. AMH means nothing. I just remember her kind of yelling at me, scolding me, that she didn't want that negative assumption in my head. She wanted me to really throw that information out. And I don't think the internet was what it is now back then. And a lot of the studies I'm going to share with you are actually post 2014, so they wouldn't have even been available. So I didn't dig anything up. I was just like, okay, maybe AMH means nothing. I don't really know, but we'll see. So fast forward to a year later. During that year, I did get pregnant naturally twice, and I miscarried twice, well into my first trimester. So I had spent a good 6 months getting pregnant and losing pregnancies. It was very emotionally and physically exhausting, as you can imagine. It was quite a roller coaster. And then I took 3 months to say, okay, I'm going to stop all of this and restore and de-stress. And that's when I put myself on what I called my 90-day egg nurturing program. I took 3 months off to renourish myself, stop trying to conceive because that was really stressful emotionally, and just bring myself back to who I was before all of this. And I really invested fully in that notion. And I did another lab test at the end of that 3 months, and I'm going to show you the results of that lab test. So this is April of 2015. Okay, let me show you. We've got the whole, this is low tech, okay? I should be doing screen sharing, but I don't have that software yet. So these are my tests a year before, and then a year later, I retested after doing all this self-nurturing, and my AMH was a whopping 0.099. So that's about, 0.1. And my FSH was 12. So not a lot of change, right? But guess what? In May of 2015, I got pregnant naturally with our second child. So when I revisit that story, it's still emotional for me because, I just remember how much emotion there was across that year, all the excitement and the losses and the fears. And then it worked out even with those numbers that most doctors would look at. Most doctors would look at those numbers and tell you, and chime in the chat if you've heard this. A lot of doctors will look at those numbers and age together and say, your chances of getting pregnant with or without IVF are less than 1%. You should really consider donor egg or a surrogate or adopting or something like that. I knew that those weren't paths for me at that time, so I wasn't looking in that direction. And, this is we say N of one. N is number of subject. It's a case study. This is my case study of one person. So that doesn't mean that it represents what's going to happen for everybody else. But that's my starting point for why I question when women are being told that AMH means this and this what means your fertility, and you should set your expectations as such and such. Because when you set your expectations for failure, your likelihood of failure is so much higher, partly because you might not even try, partly because you might be stressed out and that shuts down your fertility. There are so many ways that having a negative expectation can work against you when it comes to a process like fertility that is very much a mind-body interaction. It's not just your body. Your mind is connected with your body and they interact with each other. So that's why I get on my soapbox about what messages people are putting in your head about what your chances are, because I feel very strongly that this itself, the message itself, can influence your outcome. Furthermore, when we expand beyond the N of one and look at research on hundreds of women, research on thousands of women, we also see that AMH is, I'm just going to jump to the chase here. I'm going to go through a bunch of research studies, but let me just jump to the chase because cut to the chase. I hardly had any sleep last night. Just, my 4-year-old went to sleep early at 8 o'clock. She woke up at midnight and then she was up till 4. I was doing this research until midnight. I was trying to go to bed at midnight. She woke up. So then I was up till 4. So if I'm saying weird things and not stringing all my sentences together, this is me on hardly any sleep. So bear with me. So where was I? Somebody remind me. When we expand from my one story to the research studies, the controlled research studies on many women, we see overwhelming evidence that AMH is not a good predictor of your pregnancy outcomes. And I'm going to break that down for you. But for anybody who can't be here for the whole thing, I want you to get that message. AMH, according to the research, is not found to be a good predictor of your potential to get pregnant. Okay, I'm not going to leave you hanging on the thread wondering where we're ending up, because I want so much for you to get that message. I'm going to repeat it over and over again because I know people are popping in and out on a live stream like this. I'm also going to put links to all of the research studies that I talk about in the description below this video. You can come back to it to watch the replay. You can come back and look at the links, because I want you to understand how to think about these things and how to go look at the research yourself on other topics that you want to look at. So I'm going to share with you not just what the research says, but how I find it and how I think about it, so that I'm empowering you to do your own work and not just go off of somebody told me that this is what it means for me. Because let me tell you, I respect all the background, the training experience of medical doctors, but we're all human and we all have our blind spots. We all have our biases. And just because somebody has a credential and a degree and experience doesn't mean that they're interpreting the data in the most accurate way. And I'm going to start off showing you this in an article that, okay, this is not an article. This is a page I found on the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists from their annual conference, annual clinical and scientific meeting. So this is for the doctors to talk to each other about late breaking stuff and what's on their minds. And this little blurb they put up was a review of the final debate in the 2019 annual meeting. And the debate was the role of AMH testing for fertility. So they were debating this amongst themselves. Is this a good measure of fertile potential or not? And it's an interesting read just to be a fly on the wall and see back and forth. Dr. So-and-so says we should use it this way. Dr. So-and-so says, oh no, we shouldn't use it that way. So I want you to know these things aren't cut and dry. The doctors and researchers are arguing about this amongst themselves. There's another article I'm going to link. It's called, what is the, quote, ovarian reserve? And this is a researcher who is going on a rant himself about what we define, how we're using this terminology. So AMH, let me give you a little bit of background here. AMH, Anti-Mullerian Hormone. It is the, I'm going to pull up exact words so I'm not misquoting what it is. So this is from one of the research articles. AMH is secreted by the granulosa cells of growing follicles. Granulosa cells of growing follicles. So each of your eggs is growing in a follicle, and as it's growing, it is secreting this hormone. Okay, so we have your primordial follicles. That is your eggs that are what I call in the deep freezer, that are hanging out and waiting for their turn. And they can hang out there for years. From the time you're born, they're in the deep freezer. And then at some point, a group of them get recruited to start maturing to get ready for one of them to ovulate. So along this process, later in the stage, when your follicles are growing in the months and weeks before an egg is released, this AMH, this anti-Mullerian hormone, is released from your growing follicles. So they found that it is strongly correlated with antral follicle count. Antral follicle count is the number of follicles that are ready at a given time, that are a certain size and getting ready to release. And they found that it represents a reliable marker of ovarian reserve. So this is one introduction to an article reviewing AMH. Now, this other article, where is it? I have so many, is questioning the terminology that we use, calling it ovarian reserve, because he's saying when we say ovarian reserve, it makes us think that this is how much fertile potential we have. And he's arguing that it's misleading, because what the AMH is really showing is specifically is how many follicles we have in these later stages of development. And there is some dots that you can connect that make it look like it's probably a predictor of how many eggs are left. And so he's picking a bone over calling it ovarian reserve, because ovarian reserve should really just refer to the primordial pool and not the emerging eggs that are getting ready to be ovulated. So he's picking over the words, saying the words we use really matter because it's going to influence what people think they're talking about. So anyway, I give you all that background to help you understand that this stuff is not an open and closed case, even among the professionals who are really actively working on trying to understand it and trying to communicate well. Okay, now I am going to look at my notes to see if I'm on track with what I want to cover. And then I'm going to start going through the specific studies. I'm going to look at the chat real quick to see if there's anything that somebody's asking that I want to address right now. Okay. Okay, I want to may want to come back to this one. Cupcake Traveler, my consultant told me I have PCOS because I was born with too many eggs with my high AMH levels. Not true. Consultants are just concerned with treatment, not cause, and they know nothing about PCOS. PCOS is a condition where you are likely to have a higher than normal AMH level, and that's a very different situation than a low AMH level, and there are considerations with that. And I would agree with you, PCOS is its own complex thing that a lot of people don't understand well. So you want to really make sure that you're working with people who really understand that condition. Okay, so I'm going to start with an article that was really the best summary article. So when you're looking at research, you have individual studies that were done and they report everything that they found. And then once in a while, somebody does a summary or a meta-analysis where they pull together all the research and try to see what makes sense from a bird's eye view looking at all that. And those are really valuable articles. And this one was done by a couple of doctors who are professors and researchers and practitioners in the fertility world, specializing in AMH. So they really have a lot of background in this. And they joint wrote this article called AMH as the Primary Marker for Fertility. It's in the European Journal of Endocrinology. So they're talking about the issue of using AMH as a primary marker. And in the abstract is going to be the high-level summary of your article. Or maybe this is in the introduction. Okay, that was the abstract. So in the introduction, they're summarizing why they're talking about this. And they say, in recent years, the AMH blood test has taken an increasingly important place in the management of female fertility. But what is its real reliability and usefulness in predicting fertility? The purpose of this review is to distinguish between irrational fantasies and baseless pessimism. So you can see there that they're calling out that AMH is being kind of misused in either direction. Like, is it worthless or is it the gold standard? So the rest of the article refers to many different studies, individual studies, and pulls them all together. And I'm going to call out the top conclusions from this article. In conclusion, AMH produced by small preantral and antral follicles. AMH is produced by small preantral and antral follicles. That means as they're developing into maturity in those later stages, and is therefore a good marker for the number of follicles. It is therefore the best indirect marker for the number of primordial follicles, the ones in the deep freezer, since the growing cohort is mobilized out of the primordial pool. So a cohort of eggs is grabbed from the deep freezer and brought out. So they're connecting the dots. They're saying it's a reasonable estimate for how many are in the deep freezer, but we're really measuring how many are in development right now. However, the drawback is it doesn't, let's see if I can find a good summary. Okay. It cannot predict the genetic damage that leads to egg quality issues. So egg quality issues are one of the big factors in whether a pregnancy can be successful or not. So poor egg quality leads to not getting pregnant, or sometimes leads to pregnancies that end in miscarriage. So what they're highlighting is that even though it shows us some kind of indication of how many eggs there are in the deep freezer, it doesn't really tell us the potential for pregnancy. And they cite many studies where women with low AMH and high and normal AMH were equally likely to get pregnant. So it seems like despite a lower number in reserve, that doesn't correlate with how likely a woman is to get pregnant. So that was the big conclusion from that survey of many articles. And that was done relatively recently. Let me see the date on that. That was done in 2019. That was very recent. That was just last year. Okay, so this is every article I'm referring to is 2015 and later. So these are all very recent. Okay, the next article, association between biomarkers of ovarian reserve and infertility among older women of reproductive age. Okay, so now we're looking at a specific study. There are women, 981 women, actually, at the end it was 750 women aged 30 to 44 who had been trying to conceive for 3 months or less. And they tested their AMH and broke them into groups of low and normal. Low and normal. And they looked to see, low was considered lower than 1. Okay, there are 2 different units that are used for AMH. So if you're seeing numbers around the 1 level, that's ng per ml. So those are the numbers I'm going to use. Once in a while in an article, you'll see AMH levels that are normally in the double digits, and those are p mole per ml or something like that. So these are the ng per ml numbers. So lower than 1 was considered, they categorized them as low AMH, and then normal was above 1 and below something, I'm not sure. But here are the results. So for those groups of women, within 6 months, 62% of the women with normal AMH were pregnant. Within 6 months, in the low AMH group, 65% were pregnant. Okay, you don't have to do statistical analysis to see that the low AMH women did not have a harder time getting pregnant. Okay, in fact, it was a tiny bit higher, but not statistically significant. Okay, they looked at 12 months out. I'm going to do the same thing here. 12 months out, they looked at the same group, and for those with normal AMH, 75% got pregnant. Are you ready to see those with low AMH, below level of 1? 84% got pregnant. I don't know if that was statistically significant. I don't think it was statistically significant for the number of people, but it's definitely not lower. Okay, so that's one study. Their conclusion, I'm reading straight from the article, these findings do not support the use of urinary or blood FSH tests or AMH levels. They were also looking at FSH to assess natural fertility for women with these characteristics. So this is for women trying to conceive less than 3 months or less. Okay, so what do you think so far? Let me scan through comments. I've seen lots of chat comments coming up. Okay, so Juliet says, why is it that low AMH women find it harder to get pregnant? Surely it's not just negative self-talk. So the thing is, what we're finding from the research so far is that low AMH women are not having a harder time getting pregnant. The ones who have low AMH and got pregnant, you probably don't hear them talk about it because they probably didn't even know. They just got pregnant and never even had their AMH tested. But when they look at a group of women and test their AMH and then look and see who got pregnant, they don't see a difference. So it's more of a imaginary correlation that a lot of women who are having trouble have low AMH. And the other reason is, as you get older, your AMH is going down. So by the time you're 43, 44, by the time you're 40, I saw one graph, by the time you're 40, the average AMH is dropping below 1. So if you use 1 as a cutoff, below 40, the average over 40 woman would have technically low AMH, but that doesn't change their potential to get pregnant. The women with the normal and lower AMH seem to get pregnant at the same rates. So you can see how it's confusing, because if you have a forum of women who are all over 40 saying, I'm not getting pregnant, and they also say, I have low AMH, because those two things go together. But there are also apparently women who do have low AMH who are getting pregnant. Okay. Can AMH levels increase as well as decrease? I've been hearing people talking about increasing their levels. As you saw in the numbers that I shared, mine didn't really increase, yet I still got pregnant. So I'm going to make an argument that it might not matter that much whether it's going up and down. I had my son at hi, Nalissa. I had my son at 33, and now I'm 36, trying for a second. I had a miscarriage a few months back. I'm so sorry. The doctor told me, Rh negative women have more trouble conceiving. What do you think? I wish I could address that more. That is not something that I've delved into. So I would do the process that I'm describing. 2 things. Seek multiple opinions from different providers to see if they agree, and do some of your own research like I'm describing. Search on things, look for reputable journal articles that address this question. That's not something I have specific knowledge about. I'm sorry. Okay, somebody is speaking in a different language, and I know my assistant Anna speaks Spanish, so maybe she'll translate that for me. Kira, can you tell me how iron can help increase the quality of our eggs? I don't know specifically on iron. I ask because I have noticed when I take iron pills, my cervical mucus increases, and I think mucus can tell us how our fertility is working. Am I looking? That's a big connection. Okay, cervical mucus, iron, egg quality. They could be related or they might not. I wouldn't necessarily string all those connections together. Egg health I'd put in one basket, and iron may be and have an impact. I think it's likely. Iron, blood flow, circulation, things like that, the richness of your blood, I would put in the category of probably helpful to egg health. So if you have a deficiency, I would be concerned about that. If it's not a deficiency, I wouldn't be concerned about that. If you're having a cervical mucus lubrication issue, that's something that you can look at. There are lots of women who get pregnant who don't have great cervical mucus, so I don't think it's necessarily a showstopper, and you can use artificial lubrication to help with the issue of giving the sperm a good passageway to get to where they're going. Okay, I'm going to try to make sure I don't go too far off topic so I can get through all the AMH stuff. We're already half an hour in. How do we naturally strengthen our eggs? Woo! I have a whole live stream on improving egg quality. So that live stream is like an hour and a half long. I encourage you to go search for that. I really delve into that there. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this as well. My AMH has been high as 19. I'm almost 40. I have PCOS. Okay, so that's an example of an AMH with PCOS. AMH that high means bad egg quality, right? It took me 3 years to get pregnant, and I had to have an ovarian would resection surgery. Okay, I'm going to have to look a little bit more at what those things mean. But the question is, does high AMH mean poor egg quality? I don't think that connection has been made, but I would have to look more specifically into that question. I didn't see anything in the articles that AMH is not AMH is not an indicator of egg quality. That I did see. It's a loose indicator of quantity. And I'm going to talk more about how we might think about that. My AMH is less than 0.015. My FSH is higher than 50. I'm 37, never been pregnant. I've been told donor egg is the only way to go. It's devastating. I feel you. To hear that kind of expectation is really hard. And I just think, that might be the case, or it might not. I mean, come back to, I don't know how many times you've been tested, but I had these tests where my AMH was 0.19, my FSH was 33. Next month it was 0.07, my FSH was 9. A year later, I got pregnant naturally. So I wouldn't take those predictions as fact. I think there's a lot that isn't known. So I wouldn't say that means it's not possible. I would look at, if it means a lot to you, I would look at what might be possible and go after that. And then if it turns out it's not, cross that bridge when you get to it. But I wouldn't shut it down based on these numbers. My periods are also irregular, and it was devastating to find out I'm in premature ovarian because I only had 1 to 2 follicles. Okay, so you're looking at all these different pieces together. And, with all of these cases, I don't know. It depends on your personality and your style. And I'm kind of a fighter about things that I really want. And I'll keep looking for different ways. And I'll want to know that I tried everything before I had to throw up the white flag. So that's kind of, and then I'll make peace with that. I'll find a way to make peace with what life deals me. But I want to make sure that I tried everything that I could on the way there. So I encourage you, if you're in a special situation, to just keep learning about what the possibilities might be for you. Sophia, do women with low AMH have success with IVF? So there's some correlation that some studies have seen about lower success with IVF with lower AMH. They don't seem to respond as well to egg retrieval. So that would be probably the reason why IVF might not work as well. But I think, there was some controversy in the studies that I looked at, even how good a predictor it is for IVF success. So I'm not sure. I did the majority of my searching on generally AMH predicting fertility in general, not specifically for IVF. So if I had gone down that rabbit hole, I could have a little more to say on that specific question. But I really try to keep my general focus on natural conception, just so that I'm focusing on this general area more. And I know there are so many people that do a lot. There's a lot to understand and make sense of when we start getting into artificial reproductive technology. And I don't really have any specialized knowledge or experience to make me a more qualified expert at that. So that's the reason I focus on the natural stuff, because my specialty as a psychologist is the mind-body connection. And I feel that that's so relevant when it comes to getting pregnant on our own naturally. So if you have a lot of IVF related questions, I might tell you my impressions, but I can't say that I feel like I'm the best source for that knowledge. Okay. The question in Italian. Thank you for translating. I've listened to your meditation for 6 months. Why have I not gotten pregnant yet? Mindset and relaxation is an important piece of the pie. It is not everything. So I never want to give someone the impression that all you have to do is relax and get in the mindset. Some people, that's all they needed. I have lots of people emailing me saying, I listened for 6 months and I got pregnant. I listened for 1 month and I got pregnant. I'm sure it's because of the meditations I was listening to. Well, wonderful. I'm really excited for you. But I don't want that to send the message that this is the cure for everybody and it addresses everything. That's why I want you to be empowered by learning how to work with practitioners, learning how to understand the research so that you can find out if there is something else that is in your way. And the meditations I have on YouTube are just one style of meditation that I teach. I teach others in my other programs as well. So there are many layers of the mind-body piece as well. Okay, I am Teresa. I'm paying for my AMH and I'm excited to see what it is, what's left in my tank. I know they're all awesome. I've been egg nurturing, but I'm curious if my FSH has been varied. Okay, so I'm going to talk more. I'm going to get back to my agenda here. Okay, and then J-Reg says, thank you. That's what we're doing in trying a clinic that has success with diminished ovarian reserve and premature failure. Wonderful. So I really encourage you, when you're looking for clinics and providers, find people who are hopeful for you, because you can find people who just give you this negative rap sheet like, oh, we don't want you to lower our stats, get out of here. Or you can find somebody, sometimes you have to keep searching and you get lucky, and somebody's like, yes, I am inspired to help women who have this issue. Please come, let me help you. That's who you want on your team. And there are all kinds of providers. So if somebody gives you a stinky attitude, I encourage you to look for the cheerleaders who are going to be on your team. Okay, they're going to work harder for you. They're going to be looking for how to make it work, and they're going to give you a sense of hopefulness that is also so important for the process. Okay, back to the research. I want to pull out a few more of these studies that I found very interesting. AMH levels and fecundability. What kind of word is that? Fecundability. I don't know. It sounds like another word that's kind of gross. Fecundability means fertile potential. Okay, ability to get pregnant. So let me just revise that word. AMH and ability to get pregnant. I'm going to sound feminist here, but I'm sure that men came up with a lot of the names for these things for women's issues, because I don't think a woman would have called that fecundability. Anybody else have a feeling about some of these things? Along with 35 and up being called elderly multigravadia. If you've had children over 35, elderly, oh my gosh, give me a break. Okay, I'm 51. Okay, don't call me elderly at 35. Holy crow. Okay, so I'm sorry, that was a tangent. AMH levels and pregnancy chances in women with natural conception. Oh, okay. Okay, wait, back up. This is my lack of sleep last night getting in my way. This study is looking at women who were pregnant. So they got a group of pregnant women, 279 women from age 21 to 42, and they checked their AMH between weeks 10 and 19 of their pregnancy. And they went retrospectively. They went back to see how is the AMH for women who are getting pregnant. That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of doing it that way. And what they found was, they looked at their AMH and then asked them, how long did it take you to get pregnant? TTP, time to get pregnant. TTP was unrelated with AMH when modeled as a continuous covariate. Unexpectedly, TTP was shorter in the low AMH group than in the normal. And natural, here's the piece I want to highlight. Natural conception was observed in women with a wide range of AMH levels, including women with undetectable serum AMH, blood test AMH. So in this group of pregnant women, they found that some of them had gotten pregnant, with all different levels of AMH. There wasn't a correlation, and even those who were in the undetectable range. Okay, so their conclusion is that we shouldn't necessarily use AMH to predict pregnancy. Next study, and that study was done in 2017. Here's the next study. Is anti-Mullerian hormone associated with fecundability? November 2015 in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism. Participating women were 18 to 40 years old with a history of 1 or 2 pregnancy losses who were attempting pregnancy. 1,228 participants, and they were followed for quite a long time, at least 3 years after, to see if they were getting pregnant. Low AMH was considered below 1. Normal was 1 to 3.5, and high was above 3.5. Okay. The women with high AMH, 65% got pregnant over the long period of time. So I don't know, they all get pregnant at different times. And the medium, 65%. Those with normal AMH, 65% of them got pregnant. And those with low AMH, 66.1%. got pregnant. They also broke this down by age to see if there was a difference when you looked at women under 35 and compared their AMH, and they did look at women over 35. In both of those groups, under and over 35, they saw the same pattern. There was no statistically significant difference in pregnancy rates based on AMH. So the evidence is stacking up here. You hear the theme going? Okay, here's another one. Low concentration of circulating AMH hormone is not predictive of reduced fecundability in young, healthy women, a prospective cohort study. So this was 2012. They looked at 186 couples, fairly small study, aged 20 to 35. And their conclusion was that low serum, that's blood test, low blood AMH levels in young, healthy women do not seem to be a predictor of reduced fecundability. This is consistent with high oocyte quality in these young women, despite reduced ovarian reserve. Okay, so what they're saying is, despite that they may have had low ovarian reserve, they're still getting pregnant at the same rates. And they think because they have high egg quality. Conversely, the probability of conceiving was reduced approximately 40% in women with high AMH levels. And this persisted after exclusion of women with irregular cycles. And this may be caused by an intermediate phenotype between healthy women and those with PCOS. So they're suspecting that those with PCOS may have, they're thinking that that was the reason why the high AMH group was having a harder time. So mostly right now I'm comparing low and normal. Some of the studies didn't find a difference between high and normal and low, but this one did find a decrease for the high levels. This is a small study, so it's hard to know. I didn't look at all the data in that one. Okay. One last study. So I was on a roll here. It's like, oh my gosh, every study is showing that low AMH means nothing. AMH means nothing. It doesn't mean nothing, but in terms of your ability to get pregnant with lower AMH, it's looking very like it's not really a predictor. So far, I haven't found any study that showed that correlation. I think probably where the notion got really rolling was in the IVF programs. AMH has often been seen, and not always, to be a predictor of egg retrieval success. How many eggs are you getting? How many eggs are you getting? So they're like, well, gosh, there aren't many eggs. Everything must be going downhill. But it sounds more like quantity might not be such a critical issue. Quantity might not be the critical issue, and AMH is most likely more of a quantity measure. So what it sounds to me like is happening is if you have low AMH, you might not have a bazillion eggs in waiting or maturing, but you might still have enough to create one good one per ovulation cycle. And just because you don't have, they have these cohorts of eggs. So every cycle you've got a group of eggs, maybe it's 5, 10, 20, or 30 getting ready. And then one is picked, the other are discarded. One is picked and sent down the chute to meet its sperm, okay? So really, you only need one. So what does it matter if you've got 5 or 25 coming if you only use one and throw the rest away anyway? So that's kind of the way I'm picturing this might be working. We've got this AMH level that tells us about how many eggs we might have to draw from and how many are coming down the chute, but we only need one in the end. So that may be why the women with low AMH are getting pregnant at the same rate as the women with normal AMH. So that's kind of how the picture is looking to me. And it depends. The question that you're asking tends to dictate what you look for in the data. And when most of the research and discussions are happening within IVF clinics, the question of how many eggs can we retrieve seems to be a really critical one. So that seems to be a critical piece in their process. But when you're getting pregnant naturally, you're not doing an ovarian stimulation to retrieve a bunch of eggs at once. You only need one good egg coming down the pipeline per cycle. So as I'm reading, but it's not talked about as much because frankly, there isn't as much research money going into how to get pregnant naturally, because how much money is made from women getting pregnant naturally? How much does a clinic make when a woman gets pregnant naturally? Probably about zero. So there's less incentive to understand that process and research it. That's my kind of biased feeling about why a lot of the information is skewed toward what we know about artificial reproductive technology and less about natural pregnancy. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment and look at the messages that my lovely assistant Anna is sending me to highlight questions that I might want to get to. Some of these I have gotten to. Elisa says, do you recommend getting tested for AMH and FSH if trying to get pregnant naturally, as it's been a year since last tested? Well, that's a great question. And I showed you, my tests across 1 year on my way to getting pregnant. And there's nothing in these numbers that suggests anything about my chances of getting pregnant. Every one of these suggests that I should have a low chance of getting pregnant. And I got pregnant. Now, actually, I got pregnant 3 times, but the first 2 were poor egg quality. I had that tested, so I know it was poor egg quality. So, you know what? I still would get tested personally because I like data and numbers and I just want to know and I'm curious. But did I get functional information from that? I don't know. But it would be, I am kind of a testing junkie, really. I like to have access to more information just because you might find something interesting in there. For example, somebody else was saying she has high AMH, very high AMH, and that could uncover PCOS. So there may be things in there if you follow the trail of breadcrumbs and pay attention to where things are. I think knowledge is power, but you want to be very careful about how you interpret it. Be very careful that you aren't attaching false conclusions to the data that you're collecting. So I kind of like data. So, some people will say, I don't want to know if it's not going to make a difference, so it doesn't get in my head. And that may be a better path for you. So I think it depends a little bit on your personality and what you want to do with the information. Okay, Nazma, is there any way to increase estrogen and progesterone levels naturally? That would be a separate research topic. That's not something that I have delved into myself, but if I wanted to, I would do the process that I'm talking about. I would start searching. I would ask around. I like getting information from multiple sources, even though doctors tend to cringe when you go on forums for information. I think there are a lot of savvy women on forums. There's a whole lot of other stuff too. So you have to kind of discriminate between where is the information coming from, where do you see the commonalities. I start asking around and looking for research studies and seeing what starts to emerge as common threads and what makes sense. So I can't give you specifics on that because it's not something I've really looked into. Adrian says, how can we check the quality of the eggs? I'll come back to that in a second. Mata says, what about men? Any YouTube videos or guided meditation for them to help improve sperm quality, but also relax? Okay, these are 2 really important topics. Egg and sperm. There are 2 halves to the equation, yet we focus so much on the woman, and sometimes it's a sperm issue. And I don't want anyone to be blind to that because that's important too. So I don't have anything officially for the gentleman yet. Anything for relaxation can be helpful. Anything for your overall health. When I've come across sperm quality information, it looks a lot like the egg quality teaching the information that I recommend. So there's a website called maleinfertilityguide.com that I like to reference. There's a ton of stuff by a urologist who seems to be really into the whole person treatment. So that's a good source. And I like Michael Seeley's sleep hypnosis meditations on YouTube. Has some in common with my guided imagery style. And that can be for anybody. If you're having trouble sleeping, men or women, anxiety, depression. There's a lot of stuff on there. So those are a couple resources that you could play with. And I might create some stuff for men too. And if you come into my follow-on programs, I have a lot of meditations that aren't even specific to fertility. It's a lot of mindfulness stuff. And there's a lot of couples practices as well in my program. And I encourage those who are in the program to invite their partners to participate also. So those aren't on YouTube. Those are in a more structured program in my Conceive With Ease membership. So actually, now that you mention it, I do have a lot of stuff for self-care that the men can use as well. That's not fertility specific, but so much of our egg and sperm health has to do with overall health anyway. Okay, now Adrian, how can we check the quality of the eggs? We cannot. Isn't that frustrating? So that is mentioned over and over again in the articles that I read. AMH says nothing about egg quality. And ultimately, if you have one egg still coming every month, and with low AMH, you can definitely have one egg still coming per month. The more important factor is egg quality. And AMH is not saying anything about that. And as you saw from my numbers, I had the month before I got pregnant with a good egg, very low AMH. So there's your case study of one, and all these other studies where women are getting pregnant with low AMH. Unfortunately, all these research studies look at your HCG, your positive pregnancy test, as the end result. But as we women over 40 know, miscarriages are happening often because of low egg quality. If you only go off a positive pregnancy test, we're missing some valuable information about how many of those pregnancies went on past the first first trimester and into a successful live birth. So it's really disappointing to me that these studies don't follow up at least past the first trimester. But we have to work with the data that we have. Okay, the last article that I'm going to mention is the one that I was like, oh, shoot, everything was looking so much like AMH means nothing except maybe the higher AMH is an indicator for PCOS, which could have issues around that. But there was one that I came across when I went through that review of all the studies, and it was looking at AMH as a predictor of early menopause. They defined that as menopause before age 45. And they looked at, this is a really cool set of studies that you'll come across a lot when you're reading about women's health and fertility research, but it's called the Nurses Study. Has anybody heard of the Nurses Study? I know that in the book, it starts with the egg. Rebecca Fett refers a few times to the Nurses Study. I just found out what that was this morning because I was like, why is it called the Nurses Study? So some years ago, they decided to do a large study with how many participants? I don't know. It was like thousands of participants who were all nurses. And they picked nurses because they figured they'd be good at reporting data on health-related stuff. So they got tons of nurses from around the country and collected their data from 1996 to 1999 and all kinds of health data. It wasn't just about fertility. So that pool of data is being accessed by a lot of researchers. So these researchers went into that pool of data and said, what was their AMH when they started the study? And then they followed them up over the next 10 or 15 years to see what the pregnancy, to see who entered menopause before age 45 versus after age 45. And they saw that for those in the lower range, like 0.5, they had a high, they were more likely to experience early menopause. So, that's suggesting, so overage. So that was the one indicator that made me think, okay, so it's not nothing. There could be a chance if you have low AMH earlier on that menopause could be coming. There's a higher chance that menopause is coming before age 45. Now, the thing is, the women were still getting, this wasn't looking at them getting pregnant. So we still know that the AMH, have to put the pieces of the different studies together. Low AMH also doesn't predict pregnancy rates. So if you're younger, let's say you're 25 or 30 and you have 0.5 AMH, that, according to this study, could mean that you might experience menopause before age 45. That doesn't mean that you'll have a hard time getting pregnant until you experience menopause. So this is coming back to that notion that as long as you still have one egg coming, you've got equal chances of anybody of getting pregnant. You still got one egg coming, but you might have a shorter window. We don't know how short. It could be you stop having your cycles at age 43, but you're 33 now, so you still have 10 years. So this piece of information I'm reluctant to share, but I don't want to hold it back and bias you. There may be some utility in knowing if you have low AMH early on to say, okay, I might not have menopause at 50. It could be at 45 or 40 or something like that. So, but it doesn't mean you'll struggle to get pregnant now. As long as you're still having your cycles and you're still ovulating, you still have an equal chance. That's how I'm hearing this research. And the other thing I want to point out is they showed graphs that were very interesting in this article, and the AMH drops for everybody, those who had early menopause or not. The AMH was dropping as you approached 40 and on. So by age 40, everybody was below 1.0 pretty much. Everybody, including those who later experienced early menopause and those who did not. So be careful when you interpret this. Don't say, oh, I'm 41 and I'm below 0.1. Oh my gosh, I must be approaching menopause. That is not what that study is saying. It's saying that it could be it could be earlier than age 45. That's all the information is telling us. It could be coming earlier, but it doesn't mean that your cycles right now are less likely to result in a pregnancy. So that's a little bit of mixed information. And they didn't do this on a younger sample. So the age started at 32. So they said further research would be really helpful to look at, women in their 20s and early 30s. So that's very incomplete. But I did want to point out, there is some suggestion that it might mean something about that length of window, but it doesn't really mean anything about the potential during this cycle right now. If you have lower AMH before age 35 or 40. I hope that's not getting too confusing. I'm really concerned about people taking away bits of information and scaring themselves with it. So try to take the whole picture in mind. You can listen to the replay if you came on late and you're not getting all of this. And I'm going to put links to all of the articles so that you can delve into it. I'll be following the comments after this if you have questions and want to follow up. And I want to get now to looking at the chat to see if I'm missing anything. And then I want to tell you about final conclusions, what this really means for us on a practical level moving forward, like the takeaway messages here. Let me do that before I go to the chat because I could get lost in the chat for half an hour. Okay, so let me give you my bird's eye view of all these studies that we looked at, my own personal experience with my tests. It sounds to me like AMH can be a reflection of the pool of eggs that are waiting and the size of the cohort of eggs that's currently kind of getting harvested. It naturally goes down with age. You're going to see it lower, particularly past age 40. It's probably going to be below 1. However, that level does not seem to predict pregnancy rate when it comes to getting pregnant naturally. It might have an impact on how many eggs you get if you're doing artificial stimulation to retrieve eggs for a fertility procedure. So those are the main, and it does not say anything about egg quality. So the big picture that I'm looking at is as long as you still have an egg coming, and AMH doesn't tell you whether you're going to have one coming or not. It tells you how many are getting ready for one to come. So there's a bunch of them getting prepared and one is released. So whether it's 5 or 25, you can still have one being released even if you have low AMH. So I'm going to sum that up in a statement that somebody made in a post responding to in a comment responding to one of my posts many months ago, and it just summed it up so well. When it comes to looking at these lab tests, particularly AMH, low isn't no. If you have a low number of eggs in reserve or coming down the pipeline, that doesn't mean you have no eggs. You only need one egg per cycle. So if you take one thing from this, just those 3 words, low isn't no. Okay, so don't let that be your showstopper that tells you you have no options left anymore. The other take-home message I want to send is that egg quality is probably what matters more. And that is something that I believe can be influenced. And it's not just because of the outcomes that I had getting pregnant after 2 miscarriages that were definitely due to egg quality. I had those tests done, so I know that for sure. And they like to say that there's a common perception that it cannot be improved, but there's science behind it that suggests that that's just not true. And that's related to what leads to poor egg quality. That it's not how long the eggs have been around, because they're kind of in the deep freezer, but it's what's happening at the later stages when they're getting ready to be released. And that is influenced by the strength of our mitochondria, and the power of our mitochondria naturally goes down as we age. But there are a lot of things we can do lifestyle-wise that can impact our mitochondria. And we see that in many different health research areas. A lot of things can boost our mitochondrial functioning. We see that with heart disease, a whole bunch of other areas where we see this consistent message. If we can boost our mitochondria, we can kind of buy back some youthfulness in our whole system. So that I elaborate much more on in my live stream on improving egg quality. So go check that out. But keep in mind that, if you want just the simpleton version, everything that you do to restore and nurture your health can potentially feed back into better egg quality. So you don't need to understand all the nuts and bolts and get into the nitty gritty to start today to say, how can I nourish my energy? How can I get better sleep? How can I eat nourishing food? How can I have positive energy in my relationships? How can I have more uplifting fun in my life? These are all things that boost the energy in our system. And I like to think of being in a place of expansive energy, where we feel like our breath is flowing and we feel a lightness to us, versus constricted energy. That constricted energy is what creates that fight or flight kind of reaction in the nervous system that tends to choke off a lot of healthy nourishment in our bodies. So I elaborate on that more in the other live stream, and I elaborate on that a lot in my programs. This is kind of the essence of what I teach for fertility. I don't do a lot of specific focus on supplements and nutrition, a lot of the typical things that I think can also contribute. But I really focus on the part that I think doesn't get nearly as much attention because people just don't understand it well. And that is decreasing stress, working on the mindset, working on our outlook, and being able to cultivate kind of an energetic presence in our body that is more buoyant, that is more resilient, that is more uplifting, that is going to lead to better health outcomes overall, and I believe is going to lead to better egg quality and better fertility. So that is the essence of all of the programs I offer. And the one that I really want you to know about, because it's coming up starting on Monday, is the 7-day Ttc Chill Out Challenge. If you've done it before, please post in the comments what your experience has been. The response to this program blows me away every single time. I first did it in September of last year. I had this idea, I threw it together, and women went through, and my mind was blown by how much change women were noticing when we were just doing 15 minutes a day of self-care, meditation-oriented practices. It's a style of self-care and meditation I've been teaching long before I encountered fertility issues myself, but I was teaching it in a yoga studio that I had owned for a little while. It was connected to my psychotherapy practice, and I distilled out the things that I was teaching people one-on-one in psychotherapy, and I brought it into a group setting. And so when I wanted to help people with mindset and relaxation for fertility, I just drew on that stuff that I had taught back then that was so powerful then. And I was like, let me see if I can do this online. And I was shocked. It totally worked. We do little measures of pre and post, how people are feeling physically and emotionally. And the results are really, really uplifting. And not only are so many people feeling better by the end of just a week, but we see a lot of pregnancies coming up in the months following. It's not something you get to the end of a week and everybody's pregnant. These things take time. Sometimes it's a month or 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later. I'm still getting feedback from people who did this in September, October, November. They finally got pregnant, things like that. So I really encourage you to consider that. If you like this style, if you like my guidance and my approach, you can go, there's a link in the description already, I think, where you can go over and look at the full description. But the first time I ran it, I didn't have a full description because I was creating it on the fly. And women came in, just like opened it to see what's going to happen here. And they had a great experience. So sometimes it's even better if you don't have a lot of expectations and you're new to all this and you're just like, sure, I'll try that out. Come in with no expectations and just be open and see what happens. The program is only $29. It's not going to break your bank. And in fact, none of my programs are going to break your bank. I feel very passionate about this also, that I know many of you are having or have had your banks broken by this fertility quest. And I don't want my programs to be a part of that. So I'm trying to reach a wider audience at a lower price point so I can serve more people and still support my ability to teach you, but not break your bank. So you're not going to get into a low price program and then be pitched a really high price program that you can't afford. Okay, anybody who's in my programs can vouch for that. I'm not going to break your bank. Okay, it's like I always say, it's like about the cost of a month's worth of diapers is all that you'll pay for my monthly programs. So just be aware of that. You don't have to be afraid of sticker shock. And so the specific programs, there's a 7-day TTC challenge, which starts Monday, and you have to sign up by Friday because I have emails that go out based on your time zone. You're going to get an email at 6 o'clock in the morning, no matter where you are in the world. So the people in New Zealand get theirs first, and the people in California and Hawaii get theirs last, but it'll be at 6 a.m. in your time zone. I have to set that all up in a special email sender. That's why I close enrollment on Friday, so I can get everything situated over the weekend. And there's also some preparation stuff where you introduce yourself, meet other people, do some pre-assessment work. So I have all that for you to do. It's in there right now. There are over 50 women already signed up and getting into it. I'm releasing a new prep piece each day up until Friday. And by Friday, everything will be in there. So you can go in there and get started, kind of get your mindset already moving in this direction. And then we hit the ground running on Monday. And you can do it anytime during your day. It's pre-recorded on purpose so that everybody doesn't have to show up live. Live here in Pacific time is, in the morning is the middle of the night in another part of the world. So you don't have to worry that you're going to miss something because you're in the wrong time zone. Everybody gets equal access, and you can do it when it fits in your schedule. And I'm only asking you for 15 to 20 minutes a day. If you want to give it 30 minutes, you have a little more time to reflect, but you only need 15 to 20 minutes. So it's a small contribution to an investment in your self-care to discover what this can be like. And if you love that program, you might feel that you just have enough that you want to just run on your own and take that with you. Or you might say, can I have some more of this? So after I did that program in September, a group of people joined me for a membership, and I started creating more content along the same lines. And it really developed into a pretty cool series of 5 weeks of meditations. And I just kept adding more stuff in there. So there's a ton of guidance in there. It's called my Conceive With Ease membership. And there's also my 90-day egg nurturing program that you can unlock after you've been in that membership. So there I go into even a wider range, not just the mindset work, but the whole range of what can make an impact in your mind and body. So that's just a quick overview of what's come. And that's sort of my takeaway, like all this stuff about AMH and egg quality. There are practical things that you can do to help your situation. So I'm going to look now at the questions in the chat. to see what's coming up. Okay, I'm going back a little bit. Can you get egg quality tested without conceiving? Teresa. So no, unfortunately, there's probably two ways. If you're having egg retrieval done, they can see some indication of egg quality, but even that's a little controversial because apparently some eggs will kind of repair themselves on the way. So that's not even considered a perfect test of whether those eggs could be a viable pregnancy. If you've had a loss, you can get the tissues tested, the fetal tissues tested. And I actually feel pretty passionate about this issue too, that I'm sorry if you're going through a loss. And if you haven't been through a loss, I just want you to have this one piece of information in advance. I don't want you to know all the other details because there's a lot of different ways it can go. But I want you to know that there are tests that you can have done to see. We might be able to tell you what if the loss was due to a chromosomal issue, and it can even tell you if that came from the egg or the sperm. This is valuable information because when you have a loss, the first thing you want to know is what happened. Was it something I did? Is it something I can prevent next time? Maybe I have an autoimmune issue. Maybe I have, you want to know how, if you're going to keep trying, how to prevent it. And if you can identify that it's egg quality, then you know that's what you need to focus your energy on. That's what was the case for me. So I didn't have to wonder, is it blood clotting? Is it this? Is it that? I knew what it was. And not all doctors will tell you, not all are even aware that you can get that testing done if you miscarry at home versus having a DNC. Some people get a DNC because they want to get testing done. And I just want people to know that there are tests, and it's called the Natera Anora test. Feel free to email me anytime. If you end up in this situation and you don't remember, just ask me. I'll tell you what it is. But you can collect tissues and send them in, and so you don't have to go in for a procedure to get the testing done. And I just want people to know that because a lot of people just don't know that. So that's another way you can find out if you're having an egg quality issue, and that's a heck of a way to have to find out. I wish there was another test, and maybe we'll move in that direction over time. But as of now, no, there is no test to tell you about your egg quality right now. Do you use herbs to help balance hormones and increase fertility? That is outside of my realm, so I'm sorry I can't offer you anything on that. Melissa, thank you for sharing your research. You're welcome. Angie Rayner. Hi, Angie. I'll listen to the replay. Okay. Teresa, this was very helpful. Even if I receive a low number, I will positive as one keeps popping out each month. Yes, all I need is one. Low isn't no. You only need one egg. So the numbers are interesting, but not predictive of a whole lot. Elisa says, thank you, Teresa. I love the Ttc Chill Out Challenge. I went from an emotional roller coaster every cycle to now feeling much calmer and ready for whatever my TTC journey begins. And I love hearing that because that is ultimately the thing that we have control over, is how we ride this roller coaster. We can't always change the roller coaster and where it's going to end up, but we can still have vibrance in our lives. We can still have quality of life. We can still enjoy the things that are the gifts that are in our lives. And that's the thing that I feel so passionate about with fertility, is that I see women's passion and their joy and their quality of life getting sucked away because of their struggles. And I want to show you that you can bring all those things back on your way while you're on this journey. Maybe it's going to be a couple months, maybe it's going to be longer. I don't want you to throw away this time feeling like a mess because you're not there yet. Okay, we need to get ourselves doing well and thriving on our way to wherever we're going. Okay. And Angie says, yes, I definitely feel the same, Teresa. So yes, this is like the thing I'm most proud of with my programs is, of course, if you got pregnant, you're like, woohoo, that was an amazing program. But I'm even actually more thrilled when I hear somebody say, I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'm going to get there, but I love my life and I feel like a whole person. And then it's like, oh, mission accomplished. Yes, we want to keep working toward those take-home babies. On the way there, we want to have our contingency plans and enjoy life anyway, no matter where things are going. And Anna says, you get to meet a bunch of awesome ladies on the same journey. Yes, this is one of the really, and this is why I don't offer my programs to start on your own anytime, It's structured this way not to be coy, to not let you in the door at any time because I want to have a velvet rope out there holding you back. It's because when we come in and go through it together, there's a bonding that happens. You have connections, the sisterhood of connections, and I'm gonna make myself cry, with women all around the world who many have felt alone, and you come together and you realize you're not alone. You're in this together. You can support each other, and you're not alone. And that's some of the magic, and that's why I'm a little stubborn about not just making this what they call an evergreen program and let people go through it on their own whenever, because there's so much power doing it together. So if you want to do this together with us, sign up by Friday for the challenge. We start on Monday. If you miss this window, still stay connected. The program will probably be offered in another 2 months, but I don't want you to have to wait 2 months. So please let me know if you have any questions at all. Nicole, you're chiming in late. You're going to watch the replay off topic. Do you have any videos or information about anovulatory cycles? I don't, and I'm getting more and more questions about that when you don't have an ovulation, or for women who aren't having their monthly cycle. And I'm afraid I just don't have specific knowledge on that at this point. But what I would say with any of these issues is that because the mind body is connected as a whole system, there's always potential that whatever we do to improve our overall health and to decrease our stress, to look at emotional blockages that might be going on, subconscious fears that we have, associations, the things that we're having apprehension about. There are funny things that the body can do to direct and shut down different processes in order to protect us. So sometimes we have our defenses trying to be our ally to say, there's something we're afraid of down that path, so let's make sure that doesn't happen. And that could include things like shutting down ovulation and shutting down your menstrual cycle. And that's not something that you're going to read about in medical textbooks. That's a mind-body kind of thing. And the medical textbooks tend to be more body, as if the body's separate from the mind, but it isn't. Your whole psyche is working with you to help you survive. And sometimes there are issues on a psychological nature that could be shutting things down. So I'd just like to open that window to plant that seed. Is there something there? And then also look from other perspectives of general health, general nourishment, and working with different practitioners who can be hopeful for you and help you look for different possibilities. So that's my general thought at this stage about anovulatory cycles, or cycles that aren't happening at this time. And there are cases where people have had everything shut down, and then something changes and they get their cycle back. So we just never know where things are headed. Did I miss anything? If I missed anything, I'm sorry. If I didn't see your question or comment, I will go back and look at these later, and feel free to post in the comments later. You can also go to my free Facebook group. It's called Getting Pregnant Naturally. And I answer questions all the time in there as well. Thank you so much for all of your time. I want to send you lots of hopefulness, wonderful fertility vibes, and just know that low isn't no. Keep your hopes up, keep nourishing yourself. And I hope to see you inside of my programs or in the comments on my YouTube meditations. I wish you all the best. Take care, everybody.